Welcome to another edition of the Sim Racing Garage. I'm Barry Rowland, and in this episode, we'll be reviewing this Thrustmaster T300RS GT Edition kit. Now, this kit has been around for a while now, and I've been using it off and on for some time. And I thought it was about time we put this kit through the official SRG review process. So let's get to it. Alright, so now we're going to take a closer look at the wheel unit as a whole. First off, let's get the accessories out of the way, and well, there's really only one accessory we're really concerned about that much, and that would be this. This is obviously the desk mount, and the bolt that goes in the desk mount from the bottom like this. Now, this is actually a pretty good desk mount. It really is. It does a pretty good job, and mainly from this huge bolt in here. Get a little closer look at it over here. This is a 10 millimeter 1.5 pitch bolt, and you can see it's pretty long, so it gives us a lot of travel or range to go up and down in. We've got these little rubber feet here, actually pads on the feet that are rubber, and they rotate or actually swivel for you. So that gives you uneven surface capabilities. It's got a ribbed structure in the plastic, which of course gives it the strength that it has. And on the bottom here we can see this is actually a countersunk piece of nylon in here. You can see it's been well used by me, and that matches the bevel on the bolt itself, so it can go in here and fit nice and tight and still move around a little bit as you're tightening it up. It actually works very well. The only problem with this type of mount, and it's not just Thrustmaster's problem, is that a lot of desk, like a computer desk or something, it'll have, like on the side of it, it'll have this rim, or not really rim, just a wider piece of metal or wood on it. But right behind it, the thickness of the desk is actually like half that, or maybe even less. So when this tries to go up underneath there and contact it, it just doesn't work out too well. You need to have a desk that's about the same thickness as the front part of the desk that this is actually hitting under here. So if you don't, it's easy enough to get you a piece of wood, depending on the width you need, and stick it on top of this as you're mounting it, and that usually takes care of it. But and to be honest, I'm not sure how you fix that without having some kind of an adjustment down here also on the feet maybe, so you can actually screw these feet up and compensate for the lack, or the difference rather, of the space in between there. So that's really the only problem with this kind of mount. Other than that, it does a very good job at mounting. And of course, it mounts on the bottom with the feet going this way towards the back of the motor, and then we just screw it in at will into the case, and then it'll sit there like that. Simple enough, and just a standard kind of part you get with these kind of wheels, so that obviously we can sit our desk and race. All right, enough of that, and let me show you the bottom of this case right here, and I'm going to get a closer look to show you this 10 mil. I'm going to scrunch up my cord here. This is the 10 millimeter 1.5 pitch screw insert that they have in here in the plastic, and then we have two 6 millimeter screw holes here. And by the way, the 6 millimeter screws or bolts do not come with this unit. You have to source your own, but it is what it is, and that's not that different or strange to see that in this industry. Now, problem is, well, it's not really a problem. You can use these two 6 millimeter bolts to mount this, but then you're just mounting the wheel from this point right here. You no longer have a support or clamping force up here, and actually this is reinforced in the metal in here, so it's a good place to have clamping force. And I'll turn this sideways and actually turn it upside down so we can rotate it on the wheel. It makes it a little easier to show you guys stuff. So here's what I'm talking about. This obviously is supposed to bump up against the desk. But if you find yourself a piece of wood or whatever, metal, it doesn't matter, that will go flat across this and be the same width as this, or pretty close to the same width as this. So in other words, now we've got this thickness going all the way back to our you don't have to go all the way back, just to where these 6 millimeter screws are. Drill you a couple of holes in there to run your 6 millimeter bolts. Then you can actually source a 10 millimeter bolt and bolt it into this on whatever surface, like if you have a Bodo rig or some kind of a rig that you're bolting this to. And then you'll have this really nice strong reinforcing point bolted down tight along with these two 6 millimeter screws. It'll give you a much firmer mount when you're driving also. It's really something that's easy to do, and I had to do that myself when I was mounting it to a couple of things, and it really made a difference than trying to just put these 2 screws in. Even though it works that way, it's just better ways to do it, and it's really not that hard to achieve that. Right, so enough about the mount. Get that out of the way, and while we're on the bottom, we can see the labeling on the bottom of this servo, they call it, but it's really a housing that has a small electric motor in there. And if you'll notice, there is no GT designation on this label. So it's just a T300RS, basically. It doesn't even say RS on it. It's a T300. So the GT rating really is for distinguishing, label rather, is for the brakes, and that's where the difference is. And we'll see that when we get to the brake, or rather not the brakes. Well, partly the brakes, but the pedals themselves. So we'll get to that when we get there. So the wheel itself, and I'm going to go ahead and pull this wheel off just to get a better look at it. And if you look at the collar here, I think you guys can see this. It's got a screw in here, right there, that you screw it down obviously to lock the collar and keep the wheel from coming loose, or the collar coming loose while you're driving. And you do need to use that. It's very important that you screw that down because it will come loose. I mean, it is what it is. It will come loose. You know, you've got to have it down. And if you lose the screw, it's just kind of a wood screw. It's easy to source another one, so that's a good thing. And I'll show you where the screw lands and how that works once we get it off. Now, once you have it loose like this, or you have the screw backed out rather, then you can just kind of take your thumb. That's what I do, because it's kind of hard to get in here sometimes. And I got a small hand to grab this and get the leverage you want on it. So you can just kind of take your thumb and break it loose that way. And looking straight on at the wheel, that is actually a clockwise direction that we're screwing it in. I'll go ahead and turn the wheel now. So we'll just go ahead and keep spinning that, and you can see it backs down into the housing here because the wheel is still attached to the connector on behind this. And then once we get to a point where you can actually keep turning it, and it'll force the wheel off, or you can just kind of pull it like that, and then it makes it a lot easier to spin it. So we've disengaged from the lugs. All right, let's look at the wheel. Now, this is the standard fare for a PlayStation/PC wheel. We have the square, triangle, circle, X, and of course the PlayStation ST, R2, L2, and SEs. PlayStation button down here, and a hat switch, multi-directional. Now, of course, you can map any of these buttons you want to on the PC because it's a USB device, so that works fine. The shifters, well, they actually feel pretty good. These are just metal pieces here, and they're very quiet, which is good if you have a significant other in the next room and you're trying to race with your headphones on. And they actually feel pretty good. I've really never had any problem with these shifters. They just do their job. They just get on with doing what they're supposed to be doing. So I really don't have any complaints about them. Now, of course, they don't feel as good as some of the magnetic shifters that I use, obviously, but they were never meant to do that. Now, inside, we can see the PS2 type connector that's in there that actually connects all the buttons, obviously, through the wheel. But we also have a lug system here that makes it so you can't put the wheel on the wrong way. The bottom and 2 side lugs are one width, and the top one is actually wider than any of those. So this keeps us, again, from screwing up our pins in here when we're trying to put this wheel on. It's a very good feature to have that, and I'm sure Thrustmaster did that to keep their warranty claims down. Now, if you look on this wheel, it says, wait a minute, this is a GT setup, and it says GT wheel on it. But it says GT wheel because, well, it's the GT wheel. Again, this is really no different than what you get on a regular T300RS. So, not much else to talk about the wheel. The rubber coating is very nice. I drive this with no gloves because actually the leather gloves are kind of slick on this. So it's better to drive with just your hands. And I mainly use this wheel these days for when somebody else comes over, like a niece or a nephew, somebody younger. And I had somebody younger drive my Bodner wheel one time. Even with the forces turned all the way down, it was a little scary. So I decided that we're just going to put them on one of these wheels, either a Logitech or a Thrustmaster or something like that when they come over. Because you know when they come over, they want to get in the race car at the Sim Racing Garage. But overall, no complaints about the wheel. It has a good stiffness to it. There's no flex in it at all. And it's partly due, obviously, because it's a smaller circle, less leverage you can get on it. But I've never really had any problems with this wheel. So let's get on to the actual, what Thrustmaster calls the servo. Well, actually, it's just a housing with a electric motor in it. If I don't kick everything over down here. And what we're going to do is look at a little closer on it. This ring here obviously will not come off, and that's a good thing because you want it clamping the wheel back on. And the screw in here comes down through this hole here. And also I meant to show you on the wheel where that actually lands at, and that's on the bottom part of the lug of the wheel. Let me see if you can see the mark it's been putting in there. There it is. So it's a pretty thick piece here, so I wouldn't worry about screwing it all the way through, although I imagine if you use enough force you might be able to get through it. But that's not the point. When you put that screw and tighten it up, you just need to snug it up just so that tip of that screw is gripping this plastic here. And you can see it's been used a lot. Right. And again, an electrical connector here. All this is easy enough to take apart. You can just pull this whole thing off, and the ring comes off. And like I said, this is a very easy wheel to work on. And you'll see that as I get a little closer look when we go inside. And of course, you can see here that's a PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 3 compatible. And it depends on which one you have. That's what the switch you want to put it on. The mode button here is for PC or PlayStation. And if I remember right, the button, if it's red, that means it's in the PC mode. If it's green, it's in the PlayStation mode. I think I remember that, right? And again, we have some more PlayStation stuff over here, the L3, R3 buttons, which are also mappable. T300 logo. Again, most of you guys have seen this over and over again because this wheel has been out for a long time. Let's see, anything else we want to show? We'll go ahead and look at the back of it. You know, the first thing when I got this wheel, I noticed they had this peculiar looking 4-lug mains connector back here. Little proprietary unit there. So it's kind of strange looking, but gets the job done. The only thing about this connector is you want to make sure you have this plug pushed all the way in as hard as you can get it, because it's easy to not plug it all the way in and have some kind of intermittent issues with your wheel. And a lot of guys have had that problem. In fact, it even happened to me one time. I said, what is going on with this wheel? And I ended up pushing it all the way in hard, and then everything, all my problems cleared up. Of course, we have a USB cable coming out the back, and that is not detachable. It actually is got another side to it inside the plastic housing here. And we have another PS2 or type of interface over here. Let's get some light on it. There it is. And of course, we have the pedal connector. Whoops, over here. We got the pedal connector over here. Right, not much to see there, and not much to see overall in the back housing here. So what we'll do is go ahead and do what we love to do here at the Sim Racing Garage and crack this puppy open. And it's just a matter of taking, I'm going to have to pull this screw off too, all the way out of this hub so I can get this beauty ring off. At least that's what I'm calling it, the beauty ring. And it's got 4 screws here. We've got 3 screws behind that beauty ring that got to come loose. And then on the bottom, we have, right, 5 screws all the way around the top of this cover here that have to come off, and then it comes off with a forward motion because there's some clips in it, and then we'll be into the motor itself and we can take a look at how this thing functions. So when we come back, we'll actually, what I'm going to do is do just a quick fast forward type video where I'm just taking the thing apart so you guys can see the process I'm going through, and then we'll come back and take a look at what's inside. So now we're going to go ahead and crack this puppy open and see what's going on inside. So I'm going to speed this up so you guys don't have to watch the whole thing, but you'll still be able to see the process of getting inside. Okay, now what I'm going to do is just go ahead and pull the top part off, and you do that by picking up on the back. And it's got 2 clips on each side up here. Well, kind of clips. They're just pieces of plastic holding down here, and you kind of have to push forward on that, you know, like that. See how it kind of pushed forward and came loose? So there you go. Simple enough. I don't know what could be easier. Now, when I was taking this off, you probably saw these 2 wires hanging down here. And actually, these are for a shifter kit. They actually make a static shifter kit for this, although I've never seen one out in the wild, that you can, just like on the T500, you can make your shifters be statically mounted to the actual wheelbase instead of being on the wheel. I prefer them on the wheel myself, but I'm sure some folks do like them on the actual housing. So that's what these wires are. So you can connect your shifters to them. when I first opened it up and I saw those, I said, what the heck is that? So anyway, there you have it. We have it cracked open, and what I'm going to do next is come back and we'll take a closer look at everything that's going on inside here. Alright, so now we'll take a closer look inside our wheel. And first off, obviously the things that stick out is the motor over here. We have the cooling fan over here, and that actually obviously is going to blow air straight over the cooling fins that are on our motor over here, and it turns in a counterclockwise position to do that. I've never had any overheating or when you start losing power because this thing starts getting too hot, and I've seen or read about anyway and seen on videos some guys have had those problems, and they end up putting holes in the cowling that goes on the top of here, or they'll put a bigger fan in or something like that just to try to keep this thing running cooler. I haven't had any of those problems. It runs consistently for me even after longer sessions, so maybe it's just a matter of quality control, I don't know. But anyway, that's how that cooling system's working. On the back here we have a little circuit board, and it's got the Thrustmaster brand name on it there. In fact, let me see if I can get you guys to get a little closer look at this thing as we zoom in. I wish I zoom was faster. There it goes. Right. So basically what's going on here, remember this is a Hall effect sensor. So this little chip here is actually the Hall effect sensor itself. And there's a gap, we won't be able to see this, I don't think, in the video. I can get it to focus. Too close for focus. But anyway, the back shaft of that motor has a magnet on it back there. And I can't get a good enough angle on it, but there's a very small amount of gap in between the end of that shaft where the magnet sits and the bottom of that circuit board. There's nothing on the circuit board. Actually, the Hall effects actually works through this circuit board, and the chip determines what position that shaft is in. So very cool that it's a Hall effects, because we should get more duty cycles out of this than obviously if we had a gear in there that was actually riding on something. So big capacitor over here for filtering and to keep the noise down. A couple of surface mount capacitors, not really much to see there. So also we're going to zoom back out and go ahead and take a look at how this power gets in here. Here's our, get them a little bit wider. So our mains obviously is coming in the back here, and this is the mains wire AC coming into our power supply, which gets converted, obviously rectifier circuit in here somewhere, and it comes back out DC, and it goes back over here to the power plug. Now I've actually put a voltmeter on this, and you can see here it actually is 32.4, 32.3, let's just call it 32.5 volts on tap here from this power supply, which is very nice, especially at 1.6 amps. It gives it plenty of power for this motor to do its job. And this is actually a pretty powerful little motor. It feels good when you're actually driving it, so I've never really had a problem with it. So I don't feel like it's underpowered at all for obviously what this whole wheel setup is intended for. Now, I'm going to go ahead and, let's see, nothing else we really need to see here, but I will show you these gears here. And we got obviously a small gear attached directly to the motor shaft, and a couple of pulleys here to keep it straight and keep it tracking true. Goes down to a bigger gear obviously, and this is a serpentine type geared belt. And actually I wonder if we could see who makes that. Yeah, there it is. This is actually made in the UK, and it's, let me turn it sideways, maybe you guys can read it better if it's not upside down. It's actually a power grip, and boy, I swear that looks like it says Gates on it, but it might actually be a Gates wheel, and there's the number. Or Gates, not a Gates wheel, but a Gates belt, and it's a GT3 3243M GT9 in case you need a replacement belt. You might be able to find one without going to Thrustmaster. Anyway, so obviously it's pulling this gear, and on the front of this gear, which that's covered by the shroud here, there's another smaller gear just like this one, a little bit bigger than this, but it's a similar setup obviously. And it has a belt attached to it, and it's going to another big gear that's actually on the motor shaft in here, which is not easy to see. But I'll see if I can get an angle on it here where you guys can see that gear in there. There it is. So there's the white gear, and if I tilt it far enough, you can see the belt that's riding on top of it. So that's turning our main shaft that turns our steering wheel. And on this main shaft back in this area, there's actually a worm gear type of groove cut into the shaft that goes back here. And this is little yellow, or rather, it's kind of yellow because of the dirty grease, but it's actually white, is a kind of a cam follower configuration. And I believe that's mainly just to keep everything running true and straight, because it just rides up and down, that we'll see once we plug this in and run it and show you how that's turning the gears and everything. This will ride back and forth on that worm gear that's on the main shaft here. So why don't we go ahead and do that. Make sure the mains, again, you really got to make sure this mains plug is tight, because I've had issues before of things not working or coming on like they should, and then I push on this mains plug and everything works again. Anyway, let's go ahead and plug into the USB, and this will not turn on even with the mains is actually plugged in now. Nothing will turn on until they sense the USB on this board here, the USB current, and that's what these two little wires are for here. These little two wires go into the power supply and tell the power supply to turn on. And then our main voltage is coming from these two wires here back into there, our 32.5 volts. So let's go ahead without further ado and crank this thing up and watch all these great things work. Hopefully my mains is going to be tight enough this time. And it is. I'm just going to hold this hub so you can see it working. There you go. Of course, that's the calibration self-start test. And that's how it works. Pretty simple, really. Once you see how it's all working together, obviously not simple to build and put together. So really, that's all I wanted to show you guys. Just take a little trip inside, take a look at how everything's working. And what we'll do next is button the wheel back up, and we'll go into the pedal part of this T300RS GT setup and take a look at the pedals and the differences of them and similarities of them of a regular TP3A pedal set, or T3PA, yeah, pedal set. And then what we'll do is go over to the rig and run them. But first, let's take a closer look at the pedals next. Now we can take a closer look at the T3PA-GT pedal set. And of course, the first thing that you'll notice about these pedal sets is they have the different pedal faces than the normal T3PA. And these are thicker aluminum units. And of course, they adjust very similar to what the regular pedal set does. You can go up or down because of the holes they have in them, or we can go left or right with them, except for the brake pedal. You can no longer adjust that one sideways. And there's a good reason for that. These are plastic pedal arms, and you can see how much wider this is than the regular T3PA pedal face. It's like this much. It's a lot wider, maybe an inch, I would say, wider than that. And that brings in a problem. If you were able to take this, we'll get a little closer here, and had some other holes over here like these pedals and adjust it on one side or the other, then when you press on this metal plate, it's going to really put a lot of pressure on this plastic pedal back here and the metal threaded inserts that are in that pedal lever. Get it back, get a little better look at what I'm talking about. So if we had this pedal actually moved over towards the throttle pedal over here, you could see with your foot going on that piece of metal there on the edge now, because you're trying to do maybe some heel and toe or something, that it would really ratchet that pedal lever and the puck behind it, the supporting puck I call it, behind that lever, and it would probably twist out pretty quick. It'd probably just snap right out without too much trouble. And then of course Thrustmaster would have a maintenance nightmare on their hands, or rather warranty maintenance nightmare. So that's why we don't see any more holes than we do. And just like the other Thrustmaster pedals, or faces on the pedals, these are very easy to change out and move around. And I'll just pull one of these off real quick. Just grab the clutch. Oh, by the way, these are 2.5 mil flathead screws. They're metal. I don't think they're stainless. But they are definitely metal, because they make a nice tingy noise when I throw them in my magnetic dish over here. And we'll take a closer look at this pedal face. You can see it's rather thick. It's not a 1/4 inch thick. I would say maybe 3/16. And it does have a pretty good aggressive face to keep your feet from sliding sideways on it. And again, a closer look at this flathead screw. So it'll fit down into the counterboard holes nice and neat in our shoes or socks don't get hung up in them. The plastic puck here, just like in this, again, once we get these faces off, then we're looking at a regular T3PA pedal set. And these are the adjustment pucks that go behind the actual pedal. And these are pretty much self-explanatory. You can move them up or down, and you really don't get a lot of adjustment up or down, but at least we do get a chance to move them up and down. And sometimes these pucks, I've run into problems before. In fact, I think my throttle pedal, I had that problem, where the holes that were drilled into the puck didn't quite line up exactly with the threaded inserts. So I had to get a rat tail file down in there and just kind of round it out a little bit to make it fit, so I didn't have to really push down on the screw trying to put a pedal face on. So you may run into that problem, and it's just a quality control issue, I imagine, at the mass production units that they run these through. Metal inserts with threaded inserts in through the pedal lever itself. Also, these pedals, actually, I've never cracked or broken one of these pedal levers, and they're not that bad really as far as how they make them, considering they're made of plastic. And you can see the reinforcement ribs that run up and down both sides of this pedal lever, so that it gives it more strength when you push down on it. Doesn't give it any strength going laterally, but we're not going lateral when we use our pedal, so that's why they don't have any in the back. Right. Easy enough to see all that. What else we want to see here? Oh yeah. The conical brake mod that comes with this already installed on the GT pedal set. And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it. If you don't have it on your pedal set, if you have one of these, then you're familiar with what it looks like and what it does. Very easy to adjust. Right now I have it adjusted so the pedal hits it pretty quickly when I press on it. And it's easy to adjust. You just counterclockwise spin it, and that breaks the nut loose back there. And I could spin it down and lose the nut. And once you have it in the position you want it to, we just start the nut again. There we go. And then I would just run that nut back up against that little sleeve there that's in this bar that holds the mod. And then you can actually turn it rather clockwise, and it kind of self-tightens, which is very nice. So you can do all the adjustment with just your finger. So now I'll have longer travel than I did before. So again, that's a personal preference thing, and the feel that you like, you can pretty much dial it in with this. And there are aftermarket different durometer conical mod pieces that you can actually put in here. Guys over in UK, I believe, make some different ones that have different shore ratings, like from 50 to 70 or something, in different colors. Right. So, what else is new or different about the GT? Well, really not much else, except that you do get the sticker on this one that actually designates this as a GT part. I'll show you the label here. And you remember, if you looked on the wheel part when we were doing a closer look at the wheel, it didn't say GT on it. This one actually says T3PA GT. Now the wheels actually just said T300. It didn't even say RS on the sticker on the back of it, so go figure. So anyway, oh yeah, and we can't finish this without the look at the famous or infamous Thrustmaster proprietary side lug J12 plug. And this is a 6-conductor unit, so that means there's 6 wires in here. And the J12, if it was a regular one, we would see that the lug would be located right down the middle of it, just like an RJ45 or something. So obviously you plug this into the wheel base, and then our pedals get electrical signals so we can actually use them. Anything else I want to look at on the outside of this? That's pretty much it. It's got some rubber feet on the bottom. I haven't lost the rubber feet yet. It seems like the first thing I do when I'm using these type of pedals on a regular hardwood floor or a concrete floor is these things actually will come off eventually because of the glue on them. Then you have to heat them up with the heat gun a little bit, or put some double-sided tape and slap them back on. So now what we're going to do is have a look inside like we always do here at the SRG. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and pull out the screws on the bottom of this. And we have no less than, let me just do it this way, no less than 14 screws in this bottom plate, which is not a bad thing. It's good to have enough support to make sure this doesn't flex as much as it possibly could. So what we're going to do is I'm going to speed up the video and take out these 14 screws, and then we'll take the cover off and unplug the plug that connects this other side of this wire right here. Let me go ahead and get that out of the cable management channel. And there's a plug in here that goes to a breakout board, and we want to be careful when you take this cover off, like most times when you take a cover off, and make sure we don't pull on it and break something or pull a wire out somewhere. So let's go ahead and get to taking the screws out. So now that we have our back loose, you can see all the screws are out, so it's hanging loose. But you can also see down in here there is a 6-wire loom going over to the breakout. And you see there's a little breakout circuit board there that all of the potentiometer wires will plug into. So I've got to reach down and get rid of that loose first carefully, not to mess anything up. So we'll just get that loose so we can pull this cover all the way away. There we go. And you can see this is a little Molex plug like we see in so many of the electronics that we pull apart. Gets the job done. Little 6-pin, 6 wires there. So now we can set this aside and flip this upside down and take a little look at it. Right, so each one of these pedals has a metal base on it that has actually 6 screws that attach it to this main housing. And you can see our little breakout board here. Get a little closer look at that. And it's actually labeled to where it says gas, clutch, and brake. See those labels on there. So you don't get them mixed up when you start taking this apart if you want to do some service to it. Like say if I wanted to put a load cell kit on here, which eventually I'm going to do and do a video on that and see if there's what the differences are in the performance. There's potentiometers on each one of these pedal sets and our pedals. And you'll also notice it has this steel reinforcing bar right here on the front, which actually gives it some weight too. And they got plugs on the end of it, so I don't know if this is actually weighted, some kind of weight inside of it, or it's just the steel bar itself causing that to be there. It's got this brown looking gunky glue holding everything in. Right, so what I'm going to do is get a closer look at how these pedals actually work. Now they're all potentiometer pedals, so basically they all work the same. Now what I'm going to do is pull one of these off, and I'm going to go ahead and pull this one over here off. And this is actually, let's see, which one would this be? This would be the gas. Okay, and it is, I just want to make sure it's plugged in the right one there. So what we'll do is, and this is kind of loose here, isn't it? That little screw there. So this is actually loose, this little board, it'll twist on you. So we'll go ahead, and I've already actually been working on these pedals before, so you can see the hot glue is a little loose here. So you want to be careful not to put stress on the potentiometer where it connects down here on this potentiometer. We'll get a better look at it though once I get this disconnected. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so now we have the pedal loose, but you got to remember this pedal is not going to, this assembly will not come out obviously unless we take the front pedal face off. So let's do that real quick. I'll carefully turn this over as I kind of hide the wire there from getting pinched as I turn it over. And we'll pull this off real quick. All right. Then we can carefully turn it back over. I'm putting my hand under there to support the housing now that it's loose. And this thing should just come right out. And there it goes. Okay, so now we can actually take a closer look at how this pedal is working. And it's a pretty simple affair here. The pedal lever itself has a little round stub, if you will, that interfaces with the spring. And that's how it keeps the spring centered when we're actually using it and pressing it down. Now, I believe that somebody actually makes some different springs for this too to increase the resistance if you don't like the way the throttle pedal feels. I've seen that somewhere. I can't remember exactly where it was. That someone made some stronger springs. So you could probably, if you had the dimensions of the spring and knew what the rating was as far as poundage rating on it, you could get your own somewhere from like McPhee or somewhere like that. But we'll also take a look at how this is working. That's probably a better view on the bottom here, but it's hard to get the light in there. You've got some teeth over here. Give me a little pointer. Get my fat finger out of the way. And you can see this gear right here is actually on the potentiometer, like this. And there's another gear. In fact, I'm just going to take this loose. And this is, you don't want to do this without paying attention to where these gears are interfacing, because you want to get it back to the same place if you can once you have them disengaged. So I'm just going to tilt this pedal lever all the way back, and then I'm going to spin that gear all the way back as far as it'll go. And that's the limit of the potentiometer inside. So now I can actually take this pedal interface and move it so you can see the gears better. And there they are. So you can see that once this is engaged, and I'll push it down a little bit so they can mesh again. And there they go. How it's turning the potentiometer when the pedal's working. Really, it's a very nice setup as far as being able to work on things, and that's one of the what I'm really care about is if something breaks on this, is there a way for me to fix it? Or if I wanted to mod it some way, is it easy to mod it? And it is. And you'll see this, the brake lever itself is actually rotating on this pin. And the pin has the snap ring right there, locking it in on both sides. So all you have to do is undo one side snap ring, and then the whole thing will come apart for you. Really pretty simple to work on. Now, anything else I want to show you here? Really, that's about it. And I had all this apart before. That's why you can see these little hot glue things. I haven't finished doing what I want to do. Once I do, I'll take my heat gun and heat them back up, and then, or maybe even put more hot glue on it just to keep the wires set where they need to be and out of the way. Right. So that's about it as far as how these pedals work. A very simple affair. There's really no labeling on these potentiometers, which does not surprise me. I'm sure that Thrustmaster sources thousands of these. So yeah, they just get them made to their own specifications. And again, you can see this red paint everywhere here. That is warranty paint. So it's all over everything. You see it on the screws here. And you can see once I take a screw out, get a little closer look here. You can see there's some red paint on that. The whole idea is once I take this out and I put it back on, Thrustmaster is going to know that somebody removed that, unless I can find the exact same kind of red whatever they're using here and paint them again. They're going to know that I had this apart and just killed the warranty. That's all right though. We don't mind killing the warranty on some things here at the Sim Racing Garage. So that's about it. It's again a pretty simple affair here, how these pedals are set up, which is a good thing. I like the metal housings here, and you'll notice that this pedal housing and this pedal housing over here, actually they're all the same. All three of them are the same. Has a threaded bit here. It's been tapped. Actually, this hasn't been tapped. It's a little press-in type deal. You can see that. You can always tell the press-in ones because they'll have that raised area there. So this is a pressed into this piece of metal here. It might even be done at the factory and some kind of a weld put on it. So anyway, that's how we attach it to, let's say, a rig if we have one. And we actually have one here too, but this is actually just a hole. And the reason that's just a hole is because we have our brake mod in here, that we've seen before. A little conical brake mod. That is a hole that goes in and screws into the hold and makes secure that brake mod bracket on the bottom. Now, if it didn't have the brake mod, then we could actually use all three screw holes to secure our pedal set. That's about it. That's the inside, and really nothing else to see here. What I'm going to do is obviously put everything back together, and then we'll get the wheel and the pedals and get them over to the rig, mount it, and take this thing for a rig. We'll be driving an iRacing and a set of Corsa, and I'm even going to give PlayStation 4 a shot with Project Cars 2 rather. So we'll get to that next. All right, so here we are in the Ford GT 2017 and iRacing at Laguna Seca. And the first thing I noticed about this wheel when I was in iRacing was there was some dead zone in the middle. It means it was really loose, and I couldn't really feel what was going on. So I actually dialed in some minimum force, and I'll show you that driver settings that I used for it while I was in iRacing, and of course the regular driver settings that Thrustmaster has. And the first thing I noticed after I fixed that is really this wheel puts out a fair amount of force feedback force. Not a whole lot, obviously, but it's enough to, right there you can see I'm actually catching my slides rather easily. And really that's what force feedback's all about. It's to let us know what's going on with the car, and you can feel the front end of the car getting light as the rear end breaks loose. And again, that enables us to do the corrections that you saw when I was sliding. Now, as far as the road texture and the bumps and things, you can actually feel those too pretty well. and it just lets me know what the road course is doing and what it's giving me as far as feedback back from the road course. And a lot of that has to do with the driver settings, I think, and of course this is all personal preference. And if you look at the Thrustmaster driving settings here, you'll see that I have overall at 100%. Some guys run 90%, but I'd like to do at 100%. The detail gain settings were constant at 100, periodic at 100, and the rest were 0. And I just adjusted in iRacing for the rest of it. So pretty much I used these settings even when I was in Assetto Corsa and I was running the PlayStation. Now, when I was in iRacing, I actually used these settings for iRacing. And you can see that I had a strength of 14.3 for this particular car. Of course, that could change. And I went by the little indicator on that iRacing has for force feedback, make sure I wasn't clipping. I don't use linear mode. I tried using linear mode, and I know some guys actually do use it, but I didn't like it. I didn't have dampen oscillations checked. I usually do check that when I have my Bodner wheel running. Dampening is 0 because, well, I just didn't need it. And then we have minimum force at 10.2. And again, all of this is really personal preference when you're driving. You know, this is something I wouldn't try to tell somebody, hey, you know, this is what you got to run because this feels the best. Because I know we're all different, we feel things differently, and of course, this is just something you have to play with on your own. It's good maybe for a base to try to start from, but then you can go from that and do what you want. But you saw the curbing I just went over. That really, you could feel the curbing really well. And iRacing is, well, not the best when it comes to that kind of thing. I think Assetto Corsa has it beat a bit when it comes to feeling the rumple strips and the bumps and things. Right, so what we'll do next is go ahead and get Assetto Corsa up. So here we are in Assetto Corsa, and we're at the Nürburgring facility. We're on the GT track actually. And the driver settings for this, I just really did the strength settings. I didn't touch anything else for Assetto Corsa. And you can see, again, I'm able to catch slides very easily because the force feedback is letting me know when the front end gets light. That means my rear end is breaking loose, so it's all pretty intuitive. Again, good strength in the wheel, just like in iRacing. Now, I do feel like the force feedback is a little bit more realistic feeling to me in Assetto Corsa. It just, I think they do a better job than iRacing does in general for their force feedback in this game. So I do enjoy driving Assetto Corsa because of that reason. And that translates to all wheels, not just this Thrustmaster wheel. And also a word on the pedals. I would like to see a little bit more resistance in the accelerator pedal, but there are mods out there that allow you to achieve that. I do like the conical mod versus the spring and block system that comes stock on the T3PAs, because it gives you a sense at least that you're using pressure to regulate your braking when you're doing threshold or trail braking. It gives you a sense of feel in the foot that's a little obviously better than just a spring. And even though we're still just moving the potentiometer, it just gives you that little bit more feel that you've got something going on as far as some resistance that lets you repeat it instead of just repeating the position of your foot. Clutch pedal, well, it's a clutch pedal and it's great for standing starts, or you can actually do some heel and toe on it. I actually did some of that. So it's competent, it does its job quite well. Now, the wheel, again, in Assetto Corsa, just feels great. And you know, it's not an issue between Thrustmaster or Fanatic or Logitech at this point. It's just, I think Assetto Corsa itself is what makes the wheel feel good. Feels better than iRacing. And again, didn't have to do much to the driver settings. So I was curious, and we're going to get to that next, what this wheel is actually going to feel like when we hook it up to the PlayStation 4 and run Project Cars 2. So we'll get to that next. Alright, so now we're actually in Project Cars 2 on the PlayStation 4, and we're at Laguna Seca again, actually in the Ford GT 2017 again, because I kind of wanted to keep it the same. And the first thing I noticed about the PlayStation and Project Cars 2 for that matter is there seems to be a bit of latency, and you can see it here of when I'm turning the wheel and when the wheel is actually turning on the monitor. And I guess that's just a Project Cars 2 thing, but it's something obviously that you get used to pretty quick because, you know, being a human being, we can adapt to these things and still drive pretty aggressively on the track and get away with it. So the force feedback, PlayStation, Project Cars running on the PlayStation 4. It was a little bit disappointing comparatively when I was thinking about how it felt in iRacing and in Assetto Corsa. So, yeah, and again, the consoles typically, I think, will feel that way, and Project Cars is, well, not quite the simulator that Assetto Corsa and iRacing tend to be. But anyway, the wheel still did a good job, of course, considering what we were actually driving here. And if you're on a PlayStation or you do some console racing, that's all you do, then sure, it's a competent wheel that will let you feel the force feedback that at least that Project Cars gives you, and be able to catch slides and drive pretty aggressively and have a lot of fun. And then really, that's the end of the day, that's what this is all about, having a lot of fun. And it's good having a wheel that if I was on my PlayStation 4 and I wanted to actually try some PC games and put Assetto Corsa or something like that on and drive it, it would probably get me off the PlayStation and get me back over to the PC, because the force feedback really just feels better in the PC games that I play compared to the PlayStation ones. And again, that just might be a console thing, I'm not sure. But it is a competent wheel, and yeah, if you got a PlayStation 4, or if you're going to run an Xbox, you'd need another version of this, obviously. But the consoles tend to not relay the simulator experience as well as the PC games do, just as a general thing. But you can still feel some force feedback. You saw me catch a little spin there. And again, it's just the latency. Don't pay attention what the steering wheel's doing. Just pay attention what I'm doing. You can see the wheel's just a little bit behind me there. So anyway, that's enough of driving PlayStation 4 and our thoughts on that. And what we'll do next is just go ahead and get to the final thoughts of the Thrustmaster T300RS GT Edition kit. Final thoughts on the Thrustmaster T300RS GT wheel kit. The first thing that caught my attention with this wheel is the smoothness of the force feedback delivery cues that I was getting. I had used other wheels at this price point that had kind of a notchy feel to it, but not this one. I did have some dead zone at center, but I was able to dial that out to a point where you really couldn't notice it when racing. Now, of course, the most important thing a force feedback wheel must do is relay what a car is doing to our hands. We need to be able to feel the front end of the car as it gets light, when the rear tires are exceeding their grip limits, and allow us to make steering input corrections to keep the car from rotating out of control. And this in the high-speed corners, as well as under maximum braking in a slower corner as we enter it. The T300RS wheel was able to do that without a problem. Even running Project Cars 2 on PlayStation 4 console, which I felt had the most vague or unrealistic force feedback that of any of the games that I was actually testing this wheel on, it still did a pretty good job. I like the fact that this wheel has a Hall sensor setup for reading the motor shaft position. It should give a better service life than if they were using a physical positioning sensor, because they just tend to wear out after a while. Now, at 32.5 volts running at 1.6 amps, the motor seemed to have ample power on tap. My sample of this model never had any force feedback fade when I was running in longer sessions. Although, there are people out there that have reported this issue with their wheels. Now, the GT pedals also did a good job of allowing the user to properly control the car with braking and acceleration. Now, this conical brake mod that comes pre-installed, well, it really had a better feel to me than using the stock spring and block setup that comes with the stock ones. Although there are better conical bits available in the aftermarket segment. Now, I'll also be, when I get it around to it actually, I'll also be testing a load cell mod on the brake pedal of this set. I want to see if it can make my braking be a bit more consistent, because even though this conical brake mod was good, I wasn't as consistent with my braking as I was with, say, a load cell or a pressure-based type of brake pedal. Now, the GT set, I like the face pedals on this. They just feel a little bit more solid underfoot, and it just, the smaller pieces on the other ones just didn't give you that feeling. Now, at $377, for the market segment that this kit is intended for, it does, well, the job it was designed to do. I would give the T300RS GT a look if I was in this market for a force feedback solution. But remember, you can get the same performance from the non-GT T300RS kit for about $345. So that's like over $30 you can save. So if you don't want the conical brake mod and the upgraded pedal plates, then I would probably just go with that model at the end of the day. I'm Barry Rowland, and thanks again for watching the Sim Racing Garage channel.